For more on early elections in Britain, we joined in the studio by Professor Malte Broek, who is the Associate Professor in International Relations at Wits University. Thank you very much for joining us. Well, there has been a referendum and there was a very, convincing vote of Brexit. However, the opposition has been opposed against this. Now, Theresa May says they've been undermining this transition as she calls for an election. Is this a viable decision?
I think from the perspective of the Prime Minister, it actually makes a lot of sense, and I think a number of reasons can be named here. So very recently we've seen new polls, and we could see that the Conservative Party was having an extensive lead over the Labour Party, so the next closest contender, of more than 20%. And within the British system, you can actually have some leeway when you're actually calling for election. And let's not forget that she wasn't elected by the people, so she followed up David Cameron, who resigned over the Brexit referendum. I think that's an attempt to also have her own majority in Parliament.
But then the timing of this decision, one would ask, why wouldn't you just continue with the term and finish it and weather the storm, whether or not the opposition is posing a threat to the transformation? You're still in charge.
Yes, well, she can be Prime Minister at least until May 2020, I think, so that would be the end of her term. But I think with the Brexit coming before that, next elections, there will be some hard consequences for the British. And most experts are pretty clear that economically speaking, it will have consequences. Most of the consequences will be rather negative. And if you look at the domestic environment in terms of austerity, I think there will be much more pressure having an election after the Brexit than actually before. Now, the Brexit will kick in about 2 years' time, so having an election now when the opinion polls are very positive, I mean, that does actually make a lot of sense.
Okay, now this is the time where there had been a vote to evoke Article 50, and many people were saying that when you look at the balance of scales in Brexit, there are others who are looking forward to uncertainty, and others are saying that Britain should look for stability. But then where will the stability come from right now? Because it looks like many people are worried about their jobs, and there's worry about investment as well, because Britain, not under the EU as well, seems very, very hard to contemplate how it will move forward on its own.
Yes, certainly. I mean, to me, it's a mystery where the stability should actually come from, because the exact terms of the Brexit we don't know. I mean, they have to be negotiated, and Britain has to renegotiate all kinds of foreign trade agreements with all kinds of countries around the world. So it's unlikely that we will see much stability in the near future. What the Prime Minister earlier on today said was basically this, that, we are having too much opposition at the moment, and she feels too weak to actually push through the hard Brexit, because this is what the Tories actually are up to.
Which brings us to the question now. What happens to Brexit in its true sense in the reign of Theresa May, unlike, post the election process?
Well, I think the Prime Minister will be re-elected and they will go for the hard Brexit. But what it actually means in specific terms, this is rather difficult to predict in detail. So we still have to wait and see a bit.
Right. Now, obviously, the question would be now the spillover onto the African economies. How will then this change the landscape?
It depends. I mean, Africa is a rather large continent, so some economies are much more dependent on EU trade, others are less. Some are more dependent on France, others are more dependent on the UK. So I think very differentiated approach would be important. Here. Certainly, it puts a big question mark on the so-called EPAs. So these are the trade agreement that the European Union is negotiating with African partners, but the EPAs are also in a crisis. So to see it from the positive side, maybe it's an opportunity to push the reset button and start all over again. So
are you certain that she'll be re-elected and then the status quo would remain, but rather on a very firm basis?
I think she has very good chance of being re-elected because it's pre-Brexit, not post-Brexit. That's my best. And for the rest, I don't want to speculate too much here.
All right, Malte, thank you very much for your time. Right, that's Professor Malte Brosik, who is of International Relations at Wits University, talking to us about the early election call by British Prime Minister Theresa May.